House Criminal Justice Committee will come to order. We will now turn to testimony on House Bills 4450 through 4453. Representative Carter, feel free to get started when you're ready.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today about House Bills 4550 through 4553. This bill package was introduced last session, made it out of committee and onto the floor, but we just ran out of time. Sitting with me today is Representative Brian Posthumus. He and I have championed this bill package last session. Brian will be able to speak to his support of productivity credits and why it's common sense policy. Also in attendance is John Cutler and Shana Fazal from the Alliance for Safety and Justice, who will be able to answer any technical questions you may have. As you know, before being elected, I spent most of my time at the Wayne County Sheriff's Department, the largest, probably toughest jail system in the state of Michigan, and the county most impacted by crime. I've worked the streets, the jails, the courts, been a union vice president, and understand all too well the importance of not only being tough on crime, but smart on crime. In front of us today is an innovative approach toward creating safer communities throughout Michigan. This package will create incentive-based programming inside the Michigan Department of Corrections that will allow eligible prisoners to be considered for earlier parole. The parole board will evaluate whether someone is deserving of parole. To be clear, 85% of those currently incarcerated and everyone who will be covered by this bill will be released and back into our communities at some point. The question we must ask ourselves as lawmakers is simple. Did we prepare them to return to their families and their communities, not just with an education, but with a work ethic and mentality to stay focused and disciplined, to work towards a goal and complete it? Will they come out safer and less likely to commit crimes than they did when they went in? So what is the policy? How do prisoners earn credit? If you look at House Bill 4450, the equation is printed out for you in black and white. If eligible prisoners earn a GED, participate and complete vocational or rehabilitation training, earn an associate's or bachelor's degree, they can earn credits capped at 20% of their minimum sentence, giving them the opportunity to appear before the parole board sooner and make their case for parole. In House Bill 4450, page 4, starting at line 15, you will find that there are certain offenses that are not included in this bill, otherwise known as carve-outs. People in prison for sex offenses such as criminal sexual conduct, human trafficking, and murder of any degree or any type are ineligible for productivity credits. This bill package has been criticized as violating the spirit of the slogan, truth in sentencing. Again, there's nothing that could be further from the truth. These bills were designed from the ground up and based on years of conversations with law enforcement leaders and victims across the state. These bills are not, let me repeat, not retroactive. The productivity credits are capped at 20% of someone's minimal term, and the bills require that the victim be told whether the person is in their case is eligible for credits. This means that just like today, every victim will know how long someone must serve before they become eligible for parole. I believe this is a fair approach for prisoners to begin their transformational process. This package elevates safety and reduces crime through rehabilitation by preparing returning citizens to come back to our communities so that they may live a crime-free, a productive life and become stronger contributors to our society. Again, this is a public safety issue. Thank you.
Madam Chair, thank you for allowing me to speak. Committee members, also thank you very much for hearing my testimony. So I'm really excited to be here today because it's not often that we have the opportunity to look at a bill package that just makes it's just common sense. It's neither conservative nor liberal. It's nonpartisan, bipartisan, however you want to view it. It's a bill package specifically to make our communities safer, put together, established, and thought through by victims of crime. There's going to be people far more intelligent and far more articulate than I am that are going to be speaking to this package, so I'm going to be relatively brief. Don't worry, Vice Chair, I can wait until you sit back down. So as I was saying, there's going to be people that are far more intelligent and far better spoken than I am that will be speaking to this package. So I'm going to keep it relatively brief. I just want to talk about two things. Number one, what this does and what this does not do. You know, this doesn't change sentencing. This isn't about sentencing. It's not. It is, we can have the conversation down the road as to whether or not the sentence for any specific crime is the correct sentence. It's about incentivizing people, incentivizing inmates to do the things necessary while incarcerated to become a more productive member of society when they are no longer incarcerated. Every single one of the inmates that this package impacts will be your neighbors at some point. Every single one of them. And so the question is, how do we want these future neighbors to act? What do we want them to be when they return home? Do we want them to be productive members of society? Do we want them to spend their years incarcerated getting their degrees, getting their GEDs, getting rehabilitation for drugs or alcohol? Do we want these incarcerated individuals to return home a better, more productive member of society? Or do we want them to return home having sat in a cell doing nothing to better themselves, nothing to improve themselves for a year, for 2 years, for 5 years, however long that may be? You see, this package is specifically about making our communities safer. It's not about whether or not somebody has the correct sentence or years on their sentence. It's not what it's about. The second thing I want to hit on, because I've had a lot of people, you know, tell me this just destroys truth in sentencing. You know, that's anybody who says that is being either disingenuous at best or dishonest at worst. I don't know which one it is, but I can tell you I spent 2 years working on this package, ensuring that it was in compliance with truth in sentencing. I spent a lot of time ensuring that that's the case. You see, as my esteemed colleague next to me pointed out, this is not retrospective. It does not change any of the sentences for people that are currently incarcerated and haven't been sentenced yet. Further, for those that it will impact, it still holds all of the safeguards put in place by truth in sentencing. It still holds them all to bear. The criminal will be notified of the length of their sentence, the maximum sentence and the minimum sentence with productivity credits. The victims of crime, too, will be notified of what their maximum sentence will be and their minimum sentence. And throughout the entire process, the victims can choose to be notified as things are updated. And again, you know, one other thing to clarify, this doesn't let people out of jail early or let people out of prison early. What it does is it gives somebody an opportunity to earn their way before the parole board. Again, if sentencing is the issue and determining what the length of sentencing should be is the issue, we can have that conversation. This is about incentivizing people to do the things necessary to become a more productive member of society for the purpose of making our community safer. Thank you, committee members. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, may I jump right in real quick?
Please.
I'm going off script. That was the script I read before. So I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about discipline is supposed to be swift and corrective, not slow and punitive. So if we put something in there to make them productive while they're in, it becomes a safety issue for not only them but the corrections officers as well. And I thought about this just now. I took my car to the car wash yesterday. I would be upset if I had driven through the car wash and it came out just as dirty or not clean. That's what we're trying to do. If we're going to send people in the front door, we have an obligation to make sure that they come out better than they did when they exit. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We do have a few members with questions. If your questions are not for the bill sponsors, would you mind holding them? Because we do have a lot of people to get through. Okay, great. Rep. Filler.
Thanks, Chair. So this does go to war with truth in sentencing, and I want to be clear, the purpose of truth in sentencing was, I guess, twofold. Time for the victim to heal and accountability for someone who committed a very serious crime. So let's use domestic violence as an example. If you are the domestic violence victim, you sit with the prosecutor or the victim's advocate or the cop who worked the case, and they say, listen, that individual just got sentenced for 4 to 6 years for pouring boiling water over you or stalking or intimidation or whatever goes into that. You can plan your life around that 4-year minimum, knowing in Michigan that you get out at your earliest date just about every time. You can pull your kids out, move to another state. You can change your name. You can go in the address confidentiality program. This legislation goes to war with that. So instead, that prosecutor turns to the victim and says, listen, they could get out 3.5, I don't know. They can take some classes. They don't actually have to finish the class. And that's why the legislation is not supported by the Michigan victims community, by the prosecutors, by law enforcement. But I do have a question, which is, are you aware that convicted arsonists, attempted murderers, and domestic violence offenders are able to get out of prison early under this legislation? Those seem like pretty heinous crimes.
So when we talked about this, we talked about sex offenders, traffickers, murderers. You just said attempted murder. So there are always nuances to this, as well as charging. As a person who has arrested people and sent it to the prosecutor, I do get that there are sometimes bargains or plea bargains. And this will never, think about this. If a person's sentenced for domestic violence, and we don't make them take any courses, any training, to combat that, any counseling, they're going to get out. Do you want them to come out the same or worse, or do you want them to come out the same and better?
I'd like to touch on that as well. Again, Vice Chair, as I was stating, this isn't about the length of sentencing. You did point out some pretty intense crimes. If the length of sentence is too short for those crimes, let's talk about that. Let's address that. That's not what this is about. This is about incentivizing people that we know unequivocally will be released at some point. So how do we want them to be released?
I'm sorry, can I get an answer to the question? It's, are you aware that convicted arsonists, attempted murderers, and domestic violence offenders are able to get out of prison early under this legislation?
They're not able to. They'll go in front of the parole board. They'll make that determination.
So
this hasn't gone through
those
yet.
crimes can access productivity credits?
Yes.
Representative Young.
I just want to kind of piggyback on what my colleague was saying. So those crimes can access productivity credits, but these are still people who are going to be released anyway. Is that correct? Is that what I just heard?
That is a yes.
Okay, so then it would behoove us to give them opportunities to improve themselves, right?
A reasonable person would think so.
And additionally, because I'm just listening to, I love the debate. And so additionally, nobody is automatically being let go, right? You've still got a parole board. And sometimes when we have these discussions, I feel like that the people who are sitting on the parole board, I wish they were here, because it sounds like they're like people that don't know what the heck they doing, because they would allow people to come before them and just let anybody go. Sometimes that's what the debate feels like. And I believe that the state does a pretty good job on who sits on that parole board. They have the competencies to know who should be let go and who should not. And if we're not trusting that system, then that is yet another problem we need to correct. But right now, I haven't heard that that's a problem. So I just want to say, thank you for bringing this forward, and I look forward for continued debate. Thank you.
Representative Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you guys for being here. Always appreciate hearing from you, and even if it's an alternative point of view, I still love hearing it. So the Senate Fiscal Analysis and our House Counsel have alerted us that at least one of these bills, I believe it's House Bill 4452, would need a 3/4 vote in the legislature to override a voter-initiated law. Are you aware of that? And the fact that all these bills are tie-barred together?
So as I said, there's a lot more intelligent people that are going to be speaking to these bills as we go through the process. Representative Carter and I wanted to speak to what the specifics are that the bills did and why they're important.
So I just want to add that, so the initiated law, Section 33 of the code, which is included in the bill, was amended in 1978 by an initiated law, which was Prop B, which means that a vote of 3/4 of the members elected to and serving in each house of the legislature is needed to amend or repeal it. With regard to prisoners sentenced for certain specific crimes, Proposal B ended the practice of awarding good time credits for good behavior and instead adopted what is commonly called the truth in sentencing. Again, this is a voter-initiated law, in which a prisoner eligible for parole must serve their entire minimum sentence before being considered before parole. And this was by the voters of Michigan on the ballot.
Thank you. I saw that and you said good time. We're not giving good time. Good time is pretty much participation trophies. You give that to every kid on the bench. This is more intentional. You have to do something to get something, to show something, to earn this.
I would like to add, there is a very stark difference between good time and productivity credits. If the bill package before you was about good time, I wouldn't be sitting here testifying in support of it. I vehemently oppose good time. My view is that you have to do something to improve yourself, to become a more productive member of society. And productivity credits are a way to incentivize that. This is not good time. It is my understanding that the 3/4 vote required is only for good time, and that you are mistaken that for productivity credits it does not require 3/4 vote. Now, I very well could be wrong, but that's what smarter people are for.
So, again, Madam Chair, if you'd mind a really quick follow-up. So again, Prop B deals with having to serve the full minimum sentence, which the productivities will change, correct?
Yes, and again, my understanding, based on 2 years of work on this, is that with it being productivity credits, it does not require a 3/4 vote. Again, I could be wrong. I believe that is only good time, not productivity credits.
Okay, thank you.
We do have a number of folks who traveled to testify and also who are on Zoom. So I'm going to ask members to write down your question. Our bill sponsor will be here the entire time, and he'll be available to take questions throughout the hearing. Thank you. All right, thank you. All right, turning to some testifiers, which is a word. I looked it up. We have Diane Marr from the West Michigan Policy Forum, and she is on Zoom.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for accommodating me via Zoom. I'm sorry I couldn't be there like last time to testify in person, but this is something that's near and dear to my heart. I am the president and chief operating officer of Fox Motors. Fox Motors is participates with the vocational village in onboarding prisoners who are up for parole into our tech program. So Vocational Village has a technician training program, which they administer in Ionia and Jackson. And we have car dealerships that are all over Michigan, and there's a severe shortage of technicians in the US, and we were looking for a variety of solutions to solve that problem for Fox. That's how I became involved with Vocational Village. We support this productivity credit concept because we've seen that this is a real strong path to rehabilitation with the people that we hire out of the village. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the success that we've had with that program. And, you know, it provides a lot of hope for people. And so I think, as citizens of Michigan and of the world, we need to look for ways to do the right thing and to help people that need second chances, and also some help along the way. So we have had 12 vocational villagers that have been hired by Fox over the last 5 years. A lot of them I know personally because I have a vested interest in this initiative. A lot of them have regained their life and found purpose again through work and through relationships at work and support systems that we offer outside of work. The tech trainee program at the village struck me as I couldn't believe how committed and passionate the staff was that works with the villagers. And it just struck me how it takes a village to, help someone who is down or has had some trauma to recover from that trauma, to start to believe in themselves again, to provide hope to them for a better future. And there are people inside the prison that are trying to do that. There are people outside the prison that are trying to do that. And I think we all have an obligation as a society to try to help those that are have gone through unfortunate circumstances one way or another. So we partner with the vocational village staff to help, and the parole officers to help them throughout their process of getting back as a productive member of society. So there are a variety of programs that we work with them on. They have initial needs that need to be met. A lot of times they just need someone to talk to, someone who knows how to navigate the system. So we provide that help for them through a foundation or through their employment with us. So we found that this has been very successful. And I would say that these employees are probably the ones that are most grateful for the job and the opportunity. So it's very rewarding because it feels like you're doing good and that it's appreciated. So I personally just feel like every person deserves a chance to realize their potential. And some people need more help than others to get there. They're not as fortunate as we are. So I just wanted to talk about that and support this bill and any path that we can find for these folks to succeed in life. Second chances are important, and we need to find a way for them to use their gifts and talents for good. So I think this is a really good way to try to solve a social problem that we have. I think we, as has been stated, there are certain criteria to get into the program. There's certain criteria and hard work that's demonstrated along the way. So I feel like this is a productive way to use their time versus just waiting to get out and then what. So I'm really passionate and supportive of this. Let me know if you have any questions, and thanks for your time.
Do we have questions for Ms. Marr? Thank you, Ms. Marr.
You're welcome.
Move on. We have David Safavian from the American Conservative Union. I'm going to ask that you limit yourself to 3 minutes. We do have a number of people who want to testify as well, so.
You're asking a lawyer and an activist to limit his remarks. Good grief. Madam Chairman, Vice Chairman Filler, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to come. I'm the Senior Vice President General Counsel for the American Conservative Union. Some of you may have heard of CPAC. That's our other trade name in our conference. But I come here really because I've seen every aspect of the criminal justice system from the inside out. I've been a police officer. I've worked in the federal courts. I've been a political appointee in the White House. I have been incarcerated. And I have seen the system up close and personal, much to my chagrin. When we come and testify and talk about criminal justice, I get a lot of kind of scratching heads. ACU talking about criminal justice, what the heck is going on? Let me tell you what we're not, to start with, and tell you why we're here. We are not a group that associates itself with abolishing prisons or defunding the police. We do not support prosecutors funded by Hungarian billionaires that choose to substitute their judgment for the judgment of the legislature. We focus on public safety. We focus on accountability, both on the individual level and accountability of government, how they're spending taxpayer money and whether we're getting the most public safety bang for our buck. And finally, we focus on human dignity. And the bottom line is that you need accountability and rehabilitation if you're in prison in order to get a shot at redemption, but that's not a guarantee. I want to associate myself with the first panel and their remarks because they really covered everything pretty well. But you know, Michigan has a 23.6% recidivism rate here. That's really good, believe it or not, even though 1/4 of the people that come out of prison go back in within 3 years. But it's not the greatest. Oklahoma, by the way, has 19%. So it's about a 25% delta from the best. Getting recidivism down is the most direct way to fight crime. Slowing that prison revolving door. And earned time credit, as opposed to good time credit, is a really critical component of that because it provides an incentive. And it provides an incentive to get treatment for addiction, get treatment for mental health, to learn new job skills, and to reenter society. It also, not coincidentally, has a significant financial savings. Now, my experience as an advocate is nobody is going to say, well, I'm willing to save a little money to put my family at risk. But what people ignore is the opportunity costs. The opportunity cost of spending $130 million on incarceration or saving $130 million if this plan is implemented, and using that money for things like more police on the streets, higher salary and retention bonuses for cops and prosecutors. Anything other than funding Chinese battery projects. But what I will say is that that $130 million can be better spent in ways that project and protect public safety. So this is something that we can't consider in a vacuum. The third thing, we know incentives work, and if this idea sounds familiar, it's because it is. We have seen a debate about this in the federal side, and I hate the whole, well, Washington's doing it, so states should too, but Donald Trump's signature criminal justice bill had exactly this proposal in it. It had earned time credit that if you went through the programming, you got released to a halfway house earlier. And we've also seen research we've seen the provision from Kansas, from Minnesota, from other states that have tied earned time credit to reductions in recidivism. And indeed, the RAND Corporation said giving inmates an opportunity to get college education has shown a direct 28% drop in recidivism rate. This is the RAND Corporation, gold standard. All of my data, by the way, is in my longer remarks. So if this is a political issue, we've seen the Trump administration take the lead on something similar. If this is a data issue, we've got all the data that shows that this works. Now, some are going to say, well, you know, despite the data and despite, you know, the politics, maybe this isn't the time to do this type of thing. With crime peaking or spiking right now, now is exactly the time to do this thing. Because it is this type of policy that will actually impact crime, as opposed to having kind of broad statements that don't do anything at the end of the day. With that, Madam Chairman,
thank you. Okay,
I'm done.
Very good. We're going to go at ease at the call of the chair, very briefly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just would like to note that this committee does not tolerate anti-Semitism or anti-Semitic tropes in any testimony or any person who is testifying before the committee. So next time someone wants to testify before this committee and has something anti-Semitic to say, don't, because you won't be welcome back.
No, you may not. We need to move on. Next, we have the Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice members. And I believe they're testifying together in a group. please just make sure you say your name and then you can go ahead and get started.
Thank you. My name's Priscilla Bordeo. Do you want everyone to go say names first?
Hi, I'm Kiana Wembley.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Priscilla Bordeo. I am Michigan State Manager for Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice. I am also a survivor of sexual assault. Since my victimization, I've dedicated myself to helping those like me, survivors of violence who are in the midst of their own healing journeys. Michigan crime survivors come from diverse backgrounds with their own unique stories and victimizations that have shaped them. But I've noticed one common thread. What survivors want most is for what happened to them to never happen to anybody else. Our criminal justice system must include the voices and needs of survivors like me if we want to truly make Michigan safer. HB 4450 through 53 have been drafted with survivors in mind and our needs considered. Productivity credits only apply to sentences going forward, and victims will be informed every step of the way. From the start, victims will be notified about whether defendants are eligible and how much time they will serve, whether they complete rehabilitation programs or not. Those who are eligible will have served their time, be held accountable, and less likely to reoffend. Ultimately, isn't that what we seek from our justice system? To ensure that those who are released are able to return as law-abiding and productive citizens? These programs equip people with the tools to get jobs, get educated, and stay out of trouble. They will be able to build stable lives and support the local economy, while taxpayers save money too. In addition to being a survivor who wants safer communities, I'm also someone who has experienced the power of redemption and grace with my own eyes. My cousin was killed in a drive-by shooting. The man who shot her eventually was considered for parole by the parole board. My uncle, her father, responded to his possible release by asking one question: is he a changed man? That's what he cared most about. He knew that if the defendant had redeemed himself and paid his debt to society, we would all be better off and safer. Redemption and rehabilitation are the foundation of safety. Without those, we risk continuing cycles of violence and victimization. I urge you to support HB 4450 through 53 because survivors like me and those in this room understand that these solutions have been proven to work. We cannot stop crime without rehabilitating those who will be released back into our communities. Thank you.
Hi, I would like to thank the committee for having us here today to talk about our strong support for the Safer Michigan Act and House Bill 4550 through 53. My name is Kiana Wembley, and I'm the Detroit chapter coordinator for Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice. I am also the founder of the Guidance Couch, a private practice that assists those with mental health needs. On Christmas Day, 1997, I was on holiday break from the University of Michigan and staying with my family in Detroit. When an argument broke out between two people I knew, I tried to intervene. Shots rang out, and I was shot multiple times. I almost died that day. I was left physically and emotionally devastated, and while I focused on my own recovery and healing, I also committed myself to ensuring that something so traumatic never happens to anyone else. What I've come to understand and what I've come to know through my own experience is that our current system doesn't do enough to stop cycles of violence. We know what programs are proven to reduce the likelihood of future crime and make us safer. Productivity credits will ensure that more people complete these programs. It doesn't make us any safer to release people into our community with little job, education, or life skills, unprepared to make ends meet, and very likely to go back into a life of crime. It doesn't make us any safer to just keep turning a revolving door and to not invest in evidence-based policies that tackle crime. Fundamentally, House Bill 4550 through 53 establishes a proven anti-crime approach. Productivity credits include the needs and voices of victims like me. It holds people accountable and makes sure they get back to work, make a living, and live productively in our communities. I need to feel safe in my community. I need to feel safe in my home. I ask that you pass productivity credits so survivors like me feel safer. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for your time. I'm Elle Travis from Detroit. I'm a sexual assault survivor and member of Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice. What is clear today is that we may all come from different backgrounds with different experiences, but we all want the same thing: safer communities. While our state has made big steps in fighting crime, we can be doing more to tackle the root causes of violence. We are all familiar with the cycles of crime that need to be put to an end. When someone leaves prison, they face barriers that make it nearly impossible to succeed. In fact, those barriers make it much more likely that they will return to a life of crime, victimize more people, and return to prison. HB 4450 through 53 and productivity credits put that to an end. Those who are eligible are people willing to turn their lives around. They have served their time and have paid back their debt to society. They want to attain the tools so they can be educated and work when they are released. It's also important to note that these are people who will be released into our communities anyway. For myself and many survivors like me, I want to know that my neighbors who may have served time have been rehabilitated. I want to know that they have gotten their lives back on track and are working hard to provide for their families. These incentives work. They turn lives around. They keep people out of trouble. This is a common sense way we can combat crime. I urge you to stand with the business community, to stand with the faith community, to stand with survivors like me. Please pass productivity credits so we can make a safer Michigan. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any questions. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
We'll next hear from. Oh, a question for the survivors?
We'll make it really quick. Thank you so much for being here. I just have one quick question. I see so many people with the shirt. So is everyone who's wearing the Survivor Speaks in support of the legislation? I'm just curious to know that.
Yes, and there are actually many watching on Zoom as well.
Okay, about how many people would you say are here with us in person on today?
We have about 20 in the room, but we have over 7,000 members.
Wow. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Next, we'll take Gary Moore, who's the former Ohio Director of Rehabilitation and the former Director of the American Correctional Association. Please try to keep your testimony succinct.
I've erased a number of items.
Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair. My name's Gary Moore. This is my 49th year in this profession. I served 8 years as Director of the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction under John Kasich, 12 and a half years as a prison warden, and am the past president of the American Correctional Association. I appreciate this opportunity. I'm here in support of this legislation that I believe is deeply and fundamentally supportive of a safe correctional environment for our staff, for those that are incarcerated, and consistent with its title, for the members of the communities of Michigan. I think it's essential for this for a system to provide a sense of hope for those confined, their families, and victims of crime. This legislation provides a framework for the incarcerated to take responsibility to improve their thinking and their lives, and in turn have the opportunity to be considered by the parole board for return to their families at an earlier date than someone that sits in their cell and does nothing. Your correctional system's a great one. It's dedicated to returning people to Michigan communities. It has quality programs. This is about expanding the opportunity and incentivizing these programs so that the communities, in fact, are safer. Ohio, during my tenure, spent 3 years studying every evidence-based program like your core programs in the state of Ohio in all 27 prisons, and found emphatically, the University of Cincinnati, that these programs reduce violence in prisons as well as recidivism, making prisons, in fact, safer. Michigan has a competent parole board. Evidence-based decision-making is part of that. This legislation does not guarantee release. It simply provides an opportunity and motivation for some and accountability for all. We've heard from victims, and I wouldn't be here without the support of victims, and I've enjoyed participating with them. I'm going to cut my comments short to this. The greatest influence I have seen with this type of program was when, after I retired and went to North Carolina for a year and a half, after 5 staff were killed in 2 prison riots in North Carolina. A fundamental part of the reform of that system, and that system is an excellent system today, it has made significant improvements, was the enhancement of an earned credit or productive credit program. Michigan had a passive program. If you did time, you got credit, right? That's not what this is. This is about people doing what we know makes a difference in the lives and changing their lives. It is clearly based on their effort. I've seen it work. Ohio has an active earned credit program that I totally supported, and have seen the benefit of not just taking one earned credit program, but taking multiple programs. This legislation provides the potential for resources to increase the amount of programs delivered, and I know you have a director or secretary in this state that would emphatically improve and increase the amount of opportunities and, in fact, make this state a safer place. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Moore? Representative Young?
Thank you. Recently, I had an opportunity to pick up one of these. You can find these at your local Costco, what is it, Home Depot, or all those different places, and they can run you about $50 because this is solid. Folks who are incarcerated out in Ionia made this. Mm-hmm. I mean, it seems like we're creating entrepreneurs. When I was at Macomb Correctional, they have a whole nursery, and they're the ones who plant the flowers. I pay $50 for somebody to come put my flowers in and take care of my lawn every single week, right? And I'm saying productivity credits just makes sense. We're providing people with these skills and trades that we need every single day. And so I just wanted to say thank you for your testimony and just show a little example of the type of work that we know can happen within our correctional system.
Thank you, Representative Young. I think it's a calling to be able to lift people up that are living in the shadows, and that's a calling. So thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Moore? Representative Devendorf?
Thank you, Mr. Moore, for being here. Recently, I had the opportunity of touring the Ionia facility, including Vocational Village, and it was very impressive. And the conversations with those who are incarcerated and in the program were very impactful in the hope that it provides, but also the incredible number of certifications that will lead to future employment. My question has to do with the effectiveness of what we're doing today. One, I'm so grateful to everybody for being here to advocate for these changes. I fully support it, and I do think this is the direction we're going for justice. But in passing this, would you agree this legislation is an acknowledgement that the success of our returning citizens depends on also these programs? And participation of the incarcerated in the programs, and also graduation from these programs by those folks who are incarcerated.
Representative, very quickly, I invested 3 years during my tenure to bring the University of Cincinnati, a well-known research university, into every prison in Ohio, all 27 prisons, to look at all core programs, including education, substance use, residential treatment. They evaluated each program individually in terms of its value of reducing violence in prison and reducing recidivism, and they also looked at the combination of taking multiple programs and its multiplying effect, and they also looked at the rate of participation, the impact of participation, and the impact of completion. I have provided that study. It's the executive summary is 36 pages, and I would be glad to ensure that the panel gets this. I think we can get that done, but we know what works, and it's important to promote that, and I'd be glad to provide that data.
I would absolutely love to see that executive report. My follow-up question has to do with if we are acknowledging that these programs are essential to the success that we're trying to achieve, does Ohio currently do anything to evaluate equitable and fair access to inmates, regardless of any identifying characteristic, for participation into the program, but also ensuring that we are supporting folks in graduating across the board? Is there work done in Ohio to ensure that everybody, regardless of demographic information, is able to participate and graduate?
Yeah, Representative, I think it's imperative that programs are based on an effective assessment program at reception, so that a complete program plan, a case plan is developed, and that it is up then to the individual to participate with that case plan, and for the unit team to support that. So it's based on the assessments that are provided, comprehensive assessments at reception and classification, that then guide people to the effective programs that will deal in diminished criminogenic effects.
I guess most directly, are we guarding against potential implicit bias in recruiting to the programs, ensuring participation and graduation from the programs?
I can speak that was a priority in Ohio to ensure that, and to ensure that each month data is collected on participation completion by all characteristics of those participating.
We do have another question for you from Representative Bazat.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I started my career as in law enforcement in 1973. I ended it in 2016, so I've been around this for 50 years. Population in the 80s in Michigan prisons was about 52.5. 2018, it was 38.5. Currently today, it's 32.5. We have programs, even by MDOC standards, the programming that they have now, 90% of prisoners are taking these programs and participating in classes to reduce their sentences. So why do we need this now, when we've, over the last 40, 50 years, we have done a pretty good job of trying to look at people that deserve to get out of prison? And I'll close by letting you know, we base our decisions on life experience. As a detective, I had 2 cases where the suspects got out of prison for homicide and recommitted another homicide. And there's nothing tougher to sit before a family and tell them, or try to answer, how these people got out of prison and recommitted another violent offense.
I understand how difficult that is, Representative. I do. The question in terms of advancing and increasing the amount of programs that are offered means that not only will more people get a chance to go into those evidence-based programs, but just like the Ohio research, when people take multiple programs in combination, it has a multiplying effect in terms of reducing future crime and future crime victims. So expanding that, and as we've talked about earlier, reducing some of the expenses, as we heard in some of the testimony, can reinvest not just in prison, but can start to reinvest earlier in people's lives before people get to prison, which was a focus in Ohio.
But don't you think we've done a good job doing that over the last 40 years? We've reduced it by over 20,000 inmates by looking at these programs, by giving special considerations when they come up before the parole board. Don't you think Michigan has done a good job?
I think Michigan has a good system. I don't know the data. I know that in Ohio, and when I started, there were 8,400 people in prison. When I became director, it's 52,000. So there was significant growth. Yeah.
Thank you. We do need to move on. Next, we'll hear from Prosecutor Jeff Getting.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Is the mic on when it's red? I just wanted to make sure they left it on. I want to make sure that I'm very clear about something. When a judge sentences a person who's committed assault with intent to commit murder to a minimum sentence of 10 years and a maximum sentence of 20 years, a process like set forth in House Bills 4450 through 53, that would allow for their release after only 8 years is exactly an attack on truth in sentencing. The judge imposed a sentence of a minimum of 10 years. Truth in sentencing requires a defendant to serve a minimum of 10 years before they're eligible to be released. Whether we call something good time credits, disciplinary credits, productivity credits, incentivized credits, or any other name that would take a sentence imposed by a judge from 10 years as a minimum to 8 years, or 7, or 5, is an attack on truth in sentencing. Truth in sentencing laws have provided a sense of legitimacy to the criminal legal process. They have provided trust in the criminal legal process for our communities and for our victims. When a victim is told their abuser, the person who shot them, the person who broke into their home, will serve 10 years in prison as a minimum sentence, or maybe 8, or maybe somewhere between 8 and 10. Those are different things. Providing certainty to our victims of violent crimes is imperative to their trust in the system and is imperative to their sense of security. The list of offenses that this doesn't apply to: armed robbery, assault with intent to commit murder, assault by strangulation, assault with a dangerous weapon, home invasion, stalking, domestic violence, aggravated domestic violence. These are all violent crimes. As has been noted, Michigan has done an excellent job over the last decade in terms of reducing its population within the Michigan Department of Corrections, reducing it by over 40%, from over 50,000 people a decade ago to 32,000 and change today. My name is Jeff Getting. I'm the Kalamazoo County Prosecuting Attorney. I'm the legislative chairperson for the Prosecutors Association for the state of Michigan, a member of its board of directors, and president-elect. And I'm here on behalf of Pam to note our objection to this attack on truth in sentencing.
We do have a couple of questions for you, sir.
Sure.
Representative Mueller?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you. Just a question. I read something that, and I don't know if it's correct or not, so I don't want to, say it, but what is the current percentage of prisoners actually paroled? What, on their first time? Is it something like 77% of prisoners are paroled at their first parole hearing? And, I want you to be able to explain, we live in a world of reality as prosecutors and police officers, not fantasy. And so can you try to explain to the committee how hard it actually is to get to prison? You don't get to prison for stealing a car the first time. You don't go to prison for stealing the car and having a gun the first time. And so, a lot of these things that you do, we have places in our county jails, like in Genesee County, Sheriff Swanson does Ignite, where we get the people that are in the criminal justice system prior to going to prison, their GED, some life skills to be able to go back into the population before they even get to prison. So isn't it sometimes better to do things for yourself, to better yourself, than to be incentivized? And what are the things that you do in your county to make sure that the people that unfortunately get caught up in the system get the rehabilitation, get their driver's license, get their GED, get some type of training, even cosmetic training, being a barber, at the jail level before we even get to prison?
Okay, so there's a whole lot in this. And I'm going to be really actually surprisingly short. In Michigan, the last fiscal year, according to the Michigan Department of Corrections, and these are all statistics that are publicly available, in the state of Michigan, 36,845 people were convicted of felonies. 6,779 were sent to prison. That's less than 1 in 5. As you said, most people, by far, over 80%, don't go to prison. 18% of people convicted of felonies go to prison. 3/4 of the people that are in prison are there as a result of a violent offense. Over 3/4 of Michigan's prison inmates are there as a result of a violent offense. With regard to the first parole hearing, and I love this phrase, incentivized sentencing, incentivized processes within the Michigan Department of Corrections, because that is what we already do. We have excellent educational, vocational, and rehabilitative programs within the Michigan Department of Corrections. Please talk to Kyle Kaminsky. 90% of our inmates participate in this. The incentive for participating in educational, vocational, rehabilitative programs is so that you're released at your first date. People in Michigan get indeterminate sentencings. You get 5 to 10, 10 to 20, 1 to 10. There's a minimum and a maximum. The incentive to participate in these rehabilitative, educational, vocational programs is to be released on your minimum. And 90% of our inmates participate in those programs already so that they are released on their minimum, and they're rewarded by the Michigan Department of Corrections for their participation. Over 80% of inmates are released at their earliest release date or within 6 months of their earliest release date. All of this is already happening within the Michigan Department of Corrections. It is what we are doing. It is working. The prosecutors do not object to this because we don't want people to have educational, vocational, rehabilitative programs. We want all of that. We want more of that. We want more reentry programs. You will have a willing partner in me, and I suspect in my association, if what you want to do is improve reentry services for returning citizens. We all want safer communities. If what you want to do is provide more services within the Michigan Department of Corrections, you will have our support. That's not what this is about. What this is about is an attack on truth in sentencing to reduce the amount of time that is imposed by the judge. If you want to talk, go ahead.
Sir, we do have some more questions for you. Representative Andrews?
Thank you, Chair. We keep hearing this idea that it's attack on truth in sentencing, but I believe we heard from the bill sponsors saying that this would not impact anybody currently incarcerated. It would only be impacting sentences going forward. And I'm trying to understand how it's not possible then at sentencing to say, okay, your minimum sentence will be 10 years if full productivity credits are taken advantage of, then that sentence would be 8 years. That seems very clear to me. There's a prescribed number of credits able to be earned in here. It's not a vague number, and it's not something that can scale beyond a certain amount. So I guess help me understand how it's not easy going forward to just lay out exactly how the sentencing could be prescribed and to give full knowledge of the earliest date at which somebody could be released.
Giving full knowledge of the earliest date that somebody could be released, or saying that if you don't earn your productivity credits, it's going to be 10. If you do earn all of your productivity credits, it'll be 8. If you earn some of them, it'll be somewhere in between. If you have a major misconduct, you're going to lose that month's credits. The truth in sentencing law says the judge imposes a minimum and a maximum, and you serve the minimum. That's a number. That's not a range. That's why it violates the truth in sentencing laws. And I get what you're saying. You know, there's a part of that that makes sense, but that is violating the Michigan's truth in sentencing laws. And if you want to change that, well, I believe it's going to take a 3/4 vote of both chambers. But if you want to change that, you know, I'm here to say Michigan's prosecutors don't want you to change that. I'm here to say that Michigan victims don't want you to change that. I'm here to say that we already have incentivized sentencing in the state of Michigan, and it is working.
I don't see how it's much different than saying 10 to 20 and the parole board still decides, because the parole board still ultimately decides, but thank you.
Representative Carter, did you have a question or comment for this?
Yeah,
gentleman?
a couple quick ones. Is there federal good time?
That would be a great question to ask your U.S. attorney. I don't know. I don't work in the federal system.
So I'll take that as a yes. Okay, how many of your trials are pleas or go to a trial for jury? What percentage, if you know?
I don't know specifically within my county or could give you a number. I could tell you that nationally, the numbers that get thrown around are 90 to 95% of cases are negotiated resolutions, which is a great point here, sir, because what we are negotiating oftentimes is the sentence that is imposed. Is that 20-year sentence in a murder or that 10-year sentence in an armed robbery? And when we are negotiating that, we are doing that with the knowledge that Michigan laws are going to impose a minimum and a maximum, and it will only be after serving that minimum that the Michigan Parole Board will consider releasing a person from the Michigan Department of Corrections.
I have two more real quick questions, and I sat on the budget last term for...
Representative, please keep them very quick,
real
because
quick,
we do have some
real
votes we
quick.
need to take.
There's some artificial deflation of inmate population due to two things. Number one was COVID, and number two, there's been no trials or juries or availability. So we expect an uptick in the population moving forward. We just appropriated like $9 million for Wayne County for gun crimes alone. So when we look at these numbers at how they've come down, it wasn't because of anything that we've put in place. It was because of COVID and the lack of ability to have trials or due process.
I 100% disagree with you respectfully, sir. The numbers did not come down in the last 2 years. The numbers have come down over the past decade. It is not a process where we went from 52,000 to 32,000 in the last 2 or 3 years. It's a process where we have gone from 52,000 to 32,000 over the last 10 years, which far precedes what we've seen in COVID. I will agree with you, though, that we do have an extraordinary backlog of cases, and there may be an uptick in the prison population as we work through those, but it will not be a significant number. It will not be from 32,000 to 40,000. It may be from 32,000 to 34,000. We may see an uptick there because of cases not being processed But the reality is if you look at the Omni data available from the Michigan Department of Corrections regarding incarceration rates for persons convicted of a felony, that statewide average has gone down year after year after year, not just in the last 2 or 3.
I'll let it go. But I was going to
Okay,
say
thank
that
you.
2 crimes you said that people didn't go to jail for, you need to come to my county, and I'll guarantee you a lot of people are in prison for those things.
Thank you, Mr. Getting.
Thank you.
We do need to move on here. I'm going to pause testimony on these bills for a moment so we can vote on some other business before us today. We do have a number of cards in support of the bills that we took testimony on today, the productivity credits bills. Those will be read into the record, both those in support and in opposition. We get kicked out of this room pretty soon, so I'm sorry that we weren't able to hear everyone who wanted to testify. That's just the nature of our schedule. There's really, we're constrained by time like everyone else. So with no further business before the committee, we will stand adjourned.